Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We are about to begin the second panel discussion. The title is, What does a Safe Europe mean for Christians? The original plan was that the introductory speech would be delivered by Father Professor Thomas Schwartz, Chief Executive Officer for the Renovabis. Unfortunately, he was not able to make it. I understand he's been hospitalized, but he was able to send to us the text of his speech. We're going to have in front of us perhaps a more beautiful face, a more beautiful version of Professor Schwartz. Our colleague will read out the speech. But before we do that, Jan Olbrycht would like to make a few brief comments with regard to the text. Can I ask already Željana, Katerina and Halina to join us here on stage? They will be our panelists. Professor Kościółniak as well, please join us on stage. And our moderator is going to be Jan Olbrycht. The floor is yours. Thank you. Yes, as a former university teacher, I usually read different texts and prepare for discussion. The text that has been written by Professor Schwartz has been prepared in English, will be read out in English. The text is, well, quite dense, so I'd like to draw attention to a number of elements that will be mentioned. The discussion and our approach to save Europe in the context of Christianity. In the text of Professor Schwartz, the text focuses on the very notion of peace. Professor Schwartz explains in his text what the ethics of peace was and is about. It's a very interesting reference to peace ethics. A number of English phrases will be mentioned, safety and security. These are some of the key notions, sometimes used interchangeably in English. There is a reference to this Catholic approach, or Christian's approach in general, to the notion of the ethics of peace, also a reference to a broader discussion on what just war is. Some of you might remember from the previous conferences, we had an excellent presentation. It can be found on YouTube. Priest Cardinal Rich, who spoke some time ago here about the very notion of just war. In the text of Professor Schwartz, there is also reference to the ethics of peace. The notion of just peace is also to be found there. There's reference to a possible, perhaps, way of understanding of what just peace can be. This notion is very much discussed in the text, in the context of Christian thinking. There is also reference to the way in which the social teaching of church refers to this notion of just peace. In my view, it's very interesting as Professor Schwartz refers to, first of all, the intervention of the German bishops from 2024 on peace, the way we understand peace, and the understanding of the German bishops. The theological and ethical dimensions are being discussed. And in the second part of the intervention, you will be able to find in the text a discussion of Renovabis, what Renovabis is as an organization, and the role of Renovabis in this context of just peace. Towards the end of the text, there are a number of indications about the way in which one might expect from the Christian perspective about peace in Europe. There are 8 different elements listed towards the end of the text, important elements from the point of view of the Christian perspective. So first of all, starting with this notion of just peace in the context of ethics, and again, reference to the German bishops, Renovabis, and conclusions. I'm sorry, I somehow started as a facilitator. I simply read the text and I simply realized that once it's read out only, it might be difficult to process because, well, if we had Professor here with us, he would add certainly some additional comments. The dynamics would be very much different. Anya will be reading out the text very well as well, but I thought it would be useful for you if I start with this introduction. Now let us listen to the original text of the presentation by Thomas Schwartz.
Your Excellencies, esteemed colleagues, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the universal longing for peace is deeply rooted in human nature and lies at the heart of the Christian message. From the beginning, Christianity has been shaped by the conviction that Jesus Christ himself is our peace. However, this fundamental hope for peace stands in sharp contrast to the current reality, in which Europe and the world are confronted with numerous complex crises and conflicts. Wars, oppression, and injustice still threaten peace for countless people. In Christian peace ethics, war is considered a total failure of humanity that deeply contradicts the divine will. Nevertheless, it is an undeniable reality of our world to which an appropriate and responsible response must be found. Recent developments, in particular the war in Ukraine, have led to a broad discussion about the turning point that requires a fundamental reorientation of security and defense policy. For Christians, a secure Europe is more than the absence of military conflict. Security means a comprehensive vision of peace linking justice, dignity, solidarity, and care for creation. This issue is therefore not only a political one, but also a profoundly theological and ethical challenge. The Christian conception of security is holistic in nature and extends far beyond purely military defense aspects. It encompasses social, economic, and ecological dimensions. If peace is understood holistically as the highest goal, that is, as comprehensive social, economic, and ecological justice, then the concept of security must also be then interpreted in these comprehensive terms. This implies that true security for Europe cannot be guaranteed solely by protecting its borders or military strength, but by promoting conditions that enable human flourishing in all its dimensions, including a healthy environment and just societies. This holistic perspective shifts the discourse from a narrow, state-centered understanding of security to a human and creation-centered approach. For Christians, therefore, a secure Europe means active engagement in issues such as economic inequality, climate change, and social cohesion, as these are seen as fundamental to lasting peace and stability, not merely as a complement to military readiness. Theological reflection on war and peace has deep roots in the Catholic tradition, dating back to the Church Fathers. The so-called doctrine of just war, bellum justum, was developed primarily by Augustine and the medieval scholastic Thomas Aquinas. This doctrine was never about glorifying war, but about safeguarding peace. Augustine formulated his thoughts on just war in his magnum opus, De Civitate Dei, in which he defined peace as the tranquility of order. This definition remains a central theological reference for the Church's teaching on war and peace, as set out in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Thomas Aquinas systematized just war theory with criteria of authority, just cause, and right intention. Even today, the Catechism raises the question of whether the just war, as described by Thomas Aquinas, still exists, underscoring the continuing relevance and, at the same time, the challenge of this doctrine in the modern world. In recent decades, peace ethics have shifted. The focus has shifted from the question of under what conditions military force can be justified to the paths that lead to peace. The model of just peace is now the defining concept of Christian peace ethics and peace policy. It is even postulated that just peace renders just war obsolete, as it opens up a perspective and a path to a prima ratio of non-violence for the transformation of conflicts. The core principles of just peace include the clear primacy of non-military instruments in peacekeeping, the consistent expansion of civil conflict management, the strengthening of the international peace order as a legal order, and the use of military force only as an absolute last resort. In addition, a reliable peace structure includes the rule of law, economic compensation to reduce stark inequalities, the strengthening of international organizations and international law to protect against unlawful violence, and a culture of respectful treatment of minorities and people of other ethnic origins to counteract intolerance and nationalist tendencies. The fundamental prohibition of violence in modern international law, as formulated in the Charter of the United Nations after the Second World War, is recognized as a major advance in the ethics of peace, even if there are exceptions. The shift from just war to just peace marks a theological and ethical maturation. This maturation recognizes the inherent limitations and moral ambivalences of violence and reflects a deeper commitment to the positive shaping of peace, rather than focusing solely on the negative limitation of war. The earlier doctrine of just war was already oriented towards the primacy of peace and the avoidance of war. Just peace deepens this by focusing on proactive, non-military means and a broader understanding of security. Violence, even when considered a last resort, is consistently portrayed as the failure of humanity. For a secure Europe, this means that although the capacity for defense may be a tragic necessity, the primary and most fundamental efforts must be directed towards the proactive constructions of peace through diplomatic, social, economic, and legal means. It requires investment in conflict transformation and reconciliation, rather than relying solely on military deterrence. This ethical maturation of peace ethics provides a robust framework for a truly secure and peaceful European future. As Professor Massimo Fagioli reminded us in the introductory speech to the previous panel, The popes since John Paul II have addressed Europe directly and repeatedly, shaping a distinct vision of the continent's vocation. On peace, this development begins with John XXIII, Pacem in Terris, placed human rights and international order at the center, urging dialogue over weapons. Paul VI, in Popularum Progressio, declared that development is the new name for peace, stressing solidarity and integral growth. John Paul II underlined in Solicitudo Rei Socialis and Centesimus Annus that peace is the fruit of both justice and solidarity, warning against structures of sin and extremes of ideology. Benedict XVI, in Caritas in Veritate, added a strong theological note. Authentic development requires love in truth, and economic activity must be guided by ethical responsibility, not merely the pursuit of profit. Finally, Pope Francis has broadened the horizon. In Laudato Si, he links the cry of the poor with the cry of the earth, insisting that ecological and social crises belong together. In Fratelli Tutti, he places fraternity and social friendship at the center, calling for a culture that overcomes indifference and rejects war. Taken together, these papal voices demonstrate that Catholic peace ethics have moved from a focus on interstate order to a much more comprehensive vision, one that embraces human dignity, integral development, ecology, solidarity, and fraternity. For the Church, a secure Europe is never simply a matter of military strength or institutional design, but a dynamic and multi-layered task rooted in a deepening theological anthropology and a culture of encounter. The German bishop's message of peace, entitled Peace to this House, was published on the 21st of February 2024. It follows in the proven tradition of the fundamental texts on peace ethics, Just Create Peace and Just Peace. The title, from Luke chapter 10, verse 5, is both mission and promise for peace work. The document describes a world in disorder, marked by violence, weakened cooperation, and rising cultural and religious tensions. It condemns the excessive violence of the 7th of October 2023 and Russia's war against Ukraine as a clear violation of international law and an attack on the European peace order and democracy based on human rights. At the same time, Israel's indisputable right to self-defense is recognized. The bishops emphasized the need for a solid debate on peace in society. Despite the bleak situation, the peace message argues for added value in the world that points to the future. More justice, overcoming violence, and peace are possible. This requires the participation of all people of goodwill to face the challenges together. The peace message is not infallible teaching, but a word of reflection in troubled times. It reaffirms the conviction that lasting peace can only grow if violent relationships are eradicated and the potential for violence is contained. At the same time, the use of military force seen as ultima ratio or counter-violence is regarded as possible or even necessary when states or population groups are confronted with serious violence and fear for their survival. The bishops emphasize that common ground between Christian pacifism and the conditional legitimization of violence, both strive for peace and promote constructive dialogue, without denying their differences. The theological and ethical debate surrounding the word of peace reflects the profound tension that arises when Christian peace ethics are applied to a world rife with violence. While the document reaffirms the ideal of nonviolence, it pragmatically recognizes the necessity of self-defense as a last resort, and thus addresses the turning point in history. Theologian Egon Spiegel takes a critical view of the document, describing it as a pale rhetoric that offers no new impetus and fails to address the core content of Jesus' peace program. In particular, the Sermon on the Mount with its beatitudes for those who renounce violence. He criticizes the fact that the legitimization of military force as an exception is advocated even by pagans who do not know God. This highlights the dilemma. How can the gospel's call to non-violence on love of enemies be reconciled with the duty to protect the weak? Others praise it as a nuanced contribution that addresses the tensions in peace ethics. It is praised as a beginning for a common service to peace and encourages the development of more specific concrete measures. The document attempts to master this difficult balancing act by affirming both the ideal of peace and the tragic necessity of defense, albeit within strict ethical limits. For a secure Europe, this means that a Christian approach cannot be simplistic. It requires constant, nuanced ethical discernment, rejecting a naive pacifism that ignores real threats, but at the same time resisting uncritical militarism. Instead, it advocates prioritizing non-military solutions while recognizing the tragic nature of defensive force as a last resort, always striving to minimize harm and actively working towards a genuine, lasting peace. This ongoing ethical struggle strengthens the Church's contribution to a morally grounded security discourse. Renovabis is the Eastern European relief organization of the Catholic Church in Germany and is dedicated to supporting people in Central, Eastern, and Southeastern Europe. Its work is deeply rooted in the principles of Catholic social teaching, in particular solidarity and integral human development, as set out in the papal encyclicals. The motto of the 2024 Pentecost campaign, "Let peace grow, you make the difference," emphasizes that peace is not created exclusively from above by states or diplomats, but must also arise from below through the concrete commitment of each individual. Renovabis is rooted in the Christian call to be instruments of peace. This is reflected in their comprehensive approach, which goes beyond mere emergency aid and aims at sustainable development and reconciliation. Renovabis provides concrete help by supporting wounded women and men in Ukraine with rehabilitation services to enable them to return to normal life. This focus on healing the physical and psychological wounds of war is a direct example of the practical application of peace ethics. In countries such as Bosnia and Herzegovina, where the aftermath of war is still palpable, Renovabis actively promotes dialogue and reconciliation between ethnic groups. This includes creating spaces for remembrance and commemoration, as well as supporting initiatives that addresses a violent past. The 29th International Renovabis Congress, which will take place in 2025, will focus on the theme of human dignity, its challenges, and protection in an increasingly polarized society. For Christians, human dignity remains inalienable as it is an image of God. This underlines that respect for human dignity is a foundation for any lasting peace. Renovabis also highlights the topic of exile, flight, and displacement, past and present, for example, in his journal OWEP. This helps to understand the profound individual and social experiences of flight and emphasizes the need for solidarity with displaced persons. Another focus of support in Ukraine is on providing psychosocial support to war victims, which is already laying the foundation for future peace efforts. Renovabis emphasizes that true peace is more than the mere absence of violence. It means comprehensive happiness, health, and well-being for all people. Renovabis shows in practice that peace building is a holistic long-term process beyond politics or deterrence. Its work demonstrates that peace building is a holistic long-term process that goes beyond political negotiations or military deterrence. The focus on human dignity, reconciliation, and the healing of social and psychological wounds of war underscores the integral nature of peace, which is essential for a truly secure Europe. The emphasis on bottom-up engagement by individuals and local communities complements efforts at the state and international levels and shows that peace grows in the hearts and actions of people. This underscores the conviction that sustainable peace can only be achieved through the active participation and transformation of each individual, and through the strengthening of civil society structures. A secure Europe for Christians is much more than the absence of war. It is a Europe that actively shapes the integral dimensions of peace as the fruit of justice, solidarity, and love. In view of the complex challenges of our time, the profound insights of Catholic peace ethics from the Church Fathers to the present day, the groundbreaking papal social teaching, and the concrete peace work of Renovabis, we formulate 8 concrete demands in the form of theses that mean a truly secure Europe for Christians. Priority for civil conflict management and prevention. A secure Europe relies on the consistent expansion and strengthening of civil means of conflict management and prevention. Military force must remain the absolute last resort, as peace is primarily achieved through dialogue, mediation, and non-violent transformation of conflicts. Strengthening international law and multilateral institutions. A secure Europe is tirelessly committed to strengthening the international peace order as a legal order, in particular the United Nations. This includes reforming the United Nations Security Council and consistently complying with international law in order to consolidate the prohibition of violence and promote state responsibility. Integral development and combating structural injustices. A secure Europe recognizes that development is the new name for peace. It actively works to overcome poverty, economic inequality, and structural injustices, both within Europe and globally, through fair trade, sustainable economic practices, and redistribution based on solidarity. Recognition and protection of human dignity as a foundation. The inalienable dignity of every human being, created in the image of God, is the basis of a secure Europe. This requires comprehensive protection of human rights, combating discrimination, and promoting a culture that understands diversity as a source of wealth and protects minorities. Promotion of fraternity and social friendship. A secure Europe is built on universal fraternity and social friendship that transcends the boundaries of nationality, origin, and religion. It promotes encounter, dialogue, and reconciliation, especially in regions affected by war and division, in order to transform mistrust into cooperation. Responsible arms control and disarmament. A secure Europe strives for a seriously restrictive arms export policy and is committed to international disarmament efforts, especially in the field of nuclear weapons. Resources tied up in armament should instead be used to solve global challenges such as climate change and poverty. Integral ecology and care for creation. A secure Europe understands the ecological crisis as an inseparable dimension of the social crisis. It commits to sustainable action in order to hear the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, and integrates climate protection and resource justice as central elements of its peace and security policy. Education and spirituality as foundations for peace. A secure Europe invests in education for peace that promotes critical thinking, empathy, and conflict resolution skills. It recognizes the spiritual dimension of peace and encourages personal conversion and prayer as sources of hope and commitment to a more peaceful world. Thank you.
Tak. Jak Państwo zauważyliście, tekst...
As you have seen, ladies and gentlemen, the text has been written by an expert, professor. Unfortunately, he's not been able to be with us. He's been taken ill, as I've said. He's unfortunately not able to answer our questions. Certainly there will be many. Let us think maybe for a while about Professor Schwartz, his health. Let us pray perhaps for his good health. Just drew attention to the elements that have been raised in this speech. There are some reference points also to what we discussed earlier, the dilemma we have, what to do when we are confronted with a difficult choice, how to solve here the dilemma of non-violence, at the same time how to support or protect those who need such help and protection, the poor ones. Also in the text, there is a moment in which Professor Schwartz says that we have to give up naive pacifism. We should not ignore the most important threats. For this reason, again, there's a question about what to do when we need to defend ourselves. Sometimes it's a tragic choice and tragic nature, the reference used here. So it is an element that refers to what we were discussing earlier today. And now I think it's a good time for us to move on, and I will give the floor to our panelists in a while. Let me just draw attention to the fact that we have to finish at the latest at 5:30, because at 6 p.m. the Holy Mass will be celebrated in the Church of Saints Peter and Paul. So we need about 30 minutes for us to move from here to the church. It's not a long way, but we need to have enough time. Can I therefore now present to you, ladies and gentlemen, our panelists. Željana Zovko has already been introduced. Let me just add, it's a unique mix of different approaches, if I can put it like this. Željana Zovko, an MEP, very experienced diplomat, Several times she acted as ambassador to different countries. At the same time, for a number of years, she's been an active member of the European Parliament, interested mainly in international affairs. It's not the same being a diplomat and being a politician. There are big differences, but I think those different viewpoints, experiences are very interesting. And perhaps Željana Zovko will refer to this. We will see whether he will speak more as a diplomat or more as a politician. We will see. But very interesting perspective, certainly. Thank you very much, Željana, for being here with us. The next speaker, Katerina Pekridou, our guest, who in a way confirms the change in the title of the conference. The original title was the role of Catholics. We changed it into the role of Christians now, because we're working together with Komisji, Catholics, but we are also open to other denominations, among others, the Protestant churches. Katerina represents the Conference of European Churches, which means that this is a conference of different Protestant churches at the level of Europe, European Union, in fact. Then Halina Bieda, an active co-organizer of the series of conferences. She's member of the program board of the Pieronek Foundation, very active also as senator of the Republic of Poland now, vice chair of the Senate Committee on Culture and Media. If you'd like to see a busy senator working a lot, Halina Bieda is an excellent example of a hard-working senator of the Republic of Poland. There is a belief that it's mainly about sitting and listening and doing nothing in the Senate. She's a very unique senator in Poland. We know Halina, she's a very special, again, senator. Also Rafał, Halina and me, we come from Silesia, the region south of Poland. Work ethics, very important for us. And Professor Kościelniak, he's from Poznań, of course. Well, I do not want to draw differences between Polish regions, but Professor Kościelniak is a philosopher from Poznań, Western Poland, professor of the Anna Mickiewicz University in Poznań. Very important expert in philosophy, author of a number of different publications. Please, if I can ask you, please take a look at our conference materials. I will not read out the information about our guests, but in the documents you can find more detailed information about our panelists. So after the introductory presentation, the text has been read out, I've got the following question. When preparing the program of this conference, the agenda, apart from Rafał, Halina, priest Sova, we've got also Mr. Schwartz, as he was recently called, from Berlin, Charge d'Affaires, Ambassador Jan Tombiński. I'm saying ambassador, he was ambassador to many different countries. He's at the moment Charge d'Affaires, Charge or Charge, as some say in Polish. Can I ask you, Professor, so that everyone knows where you are, Charge or Charge, live? Ambassador Tombiński supports us in different content-related issues, preparing the agenda. And we've been wondering about the main focus of the conference this year in the context of Europe. What does a safe Europe mean for Christians? This is the title we have selected for this panel discussion. In a way, perhaps, in an artificial way, we are first of all trying to show perhaps that there might be perhaps, or there is a Christian approach, or maybe it's just an intellectual game about a Christian approach to Safe Europe. I'm not sure whether it's real, maybe imagined, but the text we listened to for Professor Schwartz, the Safe Europe is very much linked to the ethics of peace, complementing the approach to war or just war. So my first question to the panelists, if I may, in what way, well, how do you, or in what way would you interpret this notion of safe Europe? What is at all a safe Europe? What does it mean? What can it mean Is it just an attempt to describe Europe, or maybe it's about some norms that should be perhaps applied? So the first general question to our panelists: how do you see the very notion of safe Europe? Is it something artificial, intellectual construction, or maybe it's something really serious we have to deal with? Željana first, please.
I thank you very much, Jan, and thank you for this beautiful introduction as well. I think it's quite right that we talk about what does it mean safe Europe for Christians, not only for Catholic, because we have tendency to only concentrate on where majority of religions are, but we have to understand the notion that European Union is a mixture of different beliefs, different religion, and different backgrounds as well. Especially now when we are having so many migrants who are coming with completely set beliefs and stronger identity, religious identity than we already have here in European Union. As somebody who is coming from Southeast Europe and who's been through who was born in communist time when religion was not allowed to be public, or you were not very much, you couldn't hope for a bright future if you have been seen in a church. I learned quite well that the freedom was on the other side of the spectrum of the ideology that was totalitarian at the time, so communism, that we have that we don't mention so many times. And one of the first resolution that I was very proud to support was condemnation of totalitarian regimes that was established in 2019 and that condemned all authoritarian and totalitarian regimes, so Nazism, fascism, and communism. When the war broke out, I'll just tell you from my personal experience, I went as a refugee to UK, to London, where I continued my studies. It's very radical left, University of North London. I mean, how radical left it was. The example was that Jeremy Corbyn was one of the students there, and Sadiq Khan was the one who graduated as my generation. So this is only one of the examples that you can see where I continued my studies just after the fall of Yugoslavia and the communism and the war that chased me away from my home. And I had to defend my belief there. I had to defend the fact that one totalitarian regime was fallen, and that it's not a solution to bring back the same way of thinking to world peace. So we were accused of destroying Yugoslavia, socialist dream, communist dream, but we were only fighting for freedom. And still, you have people who have the same notion that Yugoslavia could have been a socialist, socialist dream, and it took us quite a while to convince them that they should just look at the other side of the story and to understand that Croats were defending themselves. And at the time, Minister of Foreign Affairs at the United Nations, and by the way, he was a Croat, but working for Milosevic. I mean, it was Yugoslavian government at the time. He asked for arms embargo in Yugoslavia. An arms embargo at the time that when Croatia was attacked, Bosnia and Herzegovina was attacked, and it was under heavy fire. And we couldn't, comparing to Ukraine, we didn't have any friends. We didn't have anyone who could understand us, and we were still accused that we were causing this war. And that's something that, the absurd period that I couldn't understand. It was happening. And being a practical Catholic at the time, because I was brought up as a believer, as a Christian, my only refuge was in the church, where I, throughout the prayer, I tried to find some consolation. But coming back to the fact whether Christians have a safety in Europe, I think that we very much forget that safety is not only protecting the borders, safety is protecting the rights to exercise your belief. Because nowadays Christians still face the same issues when we are even discussing these issues in European Parliament, and about our beliefs and our firm beliefs that help us go through this communist period, help us go through this crisis, and as well, and that these fundamental beliefs also make us feel that we have rights as individuals to be, to be safe and to be secure that in European Union we can be who we are. Whereas migrants and those who are coming with these firm beliefs, they don't question these issues. They don't. They take it as a value, something that is taken for granted, and they never have to discuss this issue. And I think that the main conflict that is arising now in European Union is not a conflict that we are going, that this fear that is that we have within Europe, that somebody will invade us. The main conflict that we have is in open space to recognize the fact that we have, that we still don't have an open debate. What went wrong? I think Pope Ratzinger was the first one who really articulated that, and it was this relativism that was going on around our, debates and dialogues, that everything is allowed, everything is, even in the church, even in and then you can start discussing all these issues and guidances even within the Catholic Church and within those believers, and then everybody could take could take this liberty to tell you that you are either too conservative, or you are not liberal enough, or you are not good enough. And then if you're asking, for example, when we were doing our initiatives in interreligious dialogue debate, if you're asking External Action Service to organize a meeting between different religious groups to start this reconciliation or dialogue, because I know from my experience that we have to first at all recognize that the stronger civil society in a conflict is a church and Islamic community or Jewish community. And if you are asking that the money should be invested in this dialogue, then you are encountering the wall from the public service, because they say that you're too conservative, or you're like the other ones who are coming from the extreme right. So I think we need these lessons learned to understand that NGOs and churches and freedom of belief within Europe is still not recognized as the right tool in order to make a right balance for each individual in European Union to feel equal in demanding the right to at least spend our taxpayers' money to make world peace or to reform UN organization. I was listening to the speech from the professor from Renovabis. I mean, there is no reform of UN if we don't start with the basic notion that we never discuss, like Special Envoy Jan Fiegel said, this declaration of human dignity. I mean, or the contribution of the human dignity as a notion of human rights. I mean, we are in the next period, we are going to face a big debate on rights for to the abortion, where we as a Christians will have also to take side in European Parliament. And we will be pushed into this debate. But we never had a real issue, a real debate. What is for us dignity of a human being? What is for us respect for somebody's belief? Because without this respect, I don't think that there is a true dialogue and chance for a true dialogue. I don't know if I was clear enough. I was not very philosophical, but straight to the core problem that sometimes is not very pleasant to hear. But I remember that there is no peace without truth and justice, and there is no peace without respect, and there is no safety as well if you don't have on the other side somebody who would like to listen to your opinion and to respect your opinion. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. But you were a little bit diplomatic. I mean, but I understand that not to go too far with the details. But I think that this is a different perspective. As different perspective, how you define it, to show the from. It say that the same terminology like safety can be used in completely different contexts, and I think that and it doesn't mean the same. Like, for example, the safety during the war or close to the war, and the safety if in our context in the parliament. So thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you. I would like first to thank the EPP and COMECE for the invitation to be here, and all the organizers. Just to add that the Conference of European Churches is also including Orthodox churches and Anglican churches. I'm an Orthodox, but we represent 114 churches around the European continent, not the European Union. Thinking about safety and whether this is an intellectual concept only, definitely not. It is also a concept found in the Christian texts. If we read the Bible or other resources that we have, the concept is maybe different compared to the notion of safety we have in the modern time, but definitely the elements of certainty, of assurance, of a kind of spiritual safety, trust in God, trust in Christ. This is a very big part of the definition of safety in the Christian sources, in all of our traditions. So it is part of our heritage, and it is something that as churches and Christians we need to affirm. Having said that, I also want to highlight that if someone wants safety, they are Christians, they are in the wrong religion. I think when we look at the God, when we reflect at the God in whom we trust and we believe, his example is the complete opposite of safety. We're talking and believing in a God who emptied himself, became human, and actually suffered and even accepted to be crucified. So that's not a life of safety. If we look at the life of disciples, the life of martyrs of the church that we portray as examples of holiness, as examples we should follow, the saints that we honor, or the holiness we honor in different traditions. It's a risky life. It's the exact opposite of safety, right? So being Christian means leading a risky life, so much so that we should actually sacrifice ourselves. That's the demand. And the basic demand from a Christian perspective, the basic foundation of faith is the foundation of love of the neighbor. And there are no asterisks there. There's no asterisk that we should love only those who are nice to us. We should love only members of the family, only relatives, people who love us back. No, it's love to the neighbor. And as you beautifully explained, the neighbor could be the migrant in our current time. The neighbor could be any group that is discriminated and needs support. And in most of the Christian sources we have, we see that actually the neighbor is the weak, the vulnerable, the one who needs our support. So coming back to policy, I could just repeat the 8 points that Professor Schwartz eloquently described. And this is the essence, I think, of Europe, to support the well-being of everybody who is part of Europe, and to give this kind of safety for everyone as a whole, including creation. Human beings are part of creation. We are also entrusted with the care of creation, and we belong to it. So, yeah, that's, for start, my initial thinking.
Okay, but you know, someone can listen to you and say, okay, maybe you exaggerate a little bit. And Krzyś, can you just put your headphones? So, because I promised it to be in Polish. So, ktoś mógłby.
Somebody could ask, Madam, aren't you exaggerating a little bit? Mind you, I'm being a bit provocative here. Let me explain myself. Because then you expect of somebody, for example, a Christian, to live their lives as though it were a risky exercise. And it is no easy feat to live your life like that. It's not easy to say to somebody, you know what, as a matter of fact, life is hard, that's obvious. But once you've entered this particular path, risk is going to be a part and parcel of that path. It's to be taken for granted. And I continue to provoke you a little bit, madam. So maybe by saying that we rob people of something, because people look for safety and security in religion. You know, people turn to religion because they want to be safe and secure in their various life choices. Isn't there some kind of a clash there? Is it a contradiction? I know that you are just trying to paint this problem with a broad brush, but you know, when you believe in something, if you come to believe in God, is it that you enter a path that is dangerous, but at the same time you're looking for safety? So how do you see that?
Arguing that we, as Christians, we need to look for risk, or we need to prioritize risk. But we need to accept that this is part of life, and no religion, definitely not Christianity, gives the assurance that we will have an easy life. But somehow we want a comfortable religion that just satisfies our basic needs. And I think we very much want a religion that denies the reality of suffering and vulnerability. But that's part of being human beings. We are created, finite, and we are vulnerable to everything. So I'm not suggesting we need to look for risks, but the priority should be our service to the other and to the world. And when that happens, that involves risk. And so we are exposed and vulnerable.
No, to teraz...
And now this has been quite risky, quite a risky turn of phrase, but we'll return to it later. Halina, please go ahead. So I've been listening into this lecture and to the previous speakers, and I can say the following. Back then, when the eastern part of Europe was not a part of the EU, we saw Western Europe as a refuge. It's going to be safe, things are going to be easier there once we've joined, and our human rights and freedoms will be respected. And now, I think the following. For us to feel safe in Europe or in Poland or in the Polish region of Silesia, first you need to have this internal, well, you need integrity, you need to be consistent. Jan has actually mentioned that those levels of safety and security differ. Firstly, when we think of safety and security, is this physical safety. We don't want war, right? When my kids were small, I wanted them to start running as fast and walking as fast as I can so that they could run and flee if a war broke out. You know, this was this trauma of mine. So our generation never got to know war. We
know of war from films and books. In other words, what we know of war is highly theoretical. And let me share one more reflection on war. When the war in Ukraine broke out, we got together with my friends, some of them are here, and in the first weeks and months of the war, we would go to this warehouse every day, and we would take thousands of pieces of clothing to put them into order, and we would do it less and less often. And slowly, step by step, we were getting used to the fact that there was a war raging somewhere there. So you can test yourself in a given situation, but apart from wars, you have this economic safety, right, or security. We don't want to feel threatened. We also want our conscience to be clear. So this is what I meant by consistency or alignment. We Christians have our own consciousness, right? And there are commandments, including the commandment of love. And it is up to us how we go through with those. We can talk about what should be done, right? We have these 8 postulates that have been quoted here. And I think that, at least in theory, we could all subscribe to those. We would like those to be true. But the thing is, we are sinful. So the question is, how do we get there? By no means are these easy things. So my approach to life is this. What I try to do is to show things with my actions rather than just talk about it. Walk the walk, not just talk the talk. And another reflection on online safety, the safety in the web or online security. It's already been discussed and it's going to be discussed later. You've got fake news, you've got bots, you've got troll farms. After Paweł Adamowicz died, I decided that I will not add gasoline to the fire. I will not stoke up, raise this temperature of online debate. And it's costly, it's not easy for me to do that. There is so much hate and contempt and judgment online, and it's getting worse and worse. You might have read big texts, and if you have, you know that this is getting worse rather than better. Each of us, as we are here, we can contribute to peace. At least to some extent, you know, working with our loved ones, wherever we are, wherever we operate. And to follow up on what you said, ma'am, Christians need to keep in mind that they will have to make sacrifices because their faith is linked to sacrifice. And if your faith is mature, it's going to be just that. I need to know that things might happen. The thing is, in today's world, what we see is that even regular criticism is taken as a kind of an attack on church. I don't really agree with that, because these are different things, you know. Criticism is not always the same as attacking. Yeah, I agree with that. What you have said, Madam Senator, is quite important. So there have been some subtle differences between what the ladies were saying, right? Katerina said, the life of a Christian inherently contains some kind of a risk, and it's linked to how we operate. Madam Senator, on the other hand, said that Christians should take that into account. It seems like the same thing, but they are not really the same, right? Those subtleties show that those things are not black and white. There is nuance there. Professor, your turn. So, before the meeting, I've been given some kind of a warning. Jana said, I'm a practitioner, I'm a politician, and you are a philosopher. But you have suggested a very philosophical debate, which is good. You need to look for ethical debates. It's a part of our political culture. So it is good that we are not commenting on this daily current political diarrhea, pardon le mot, excuse the word. So it's good that we're talking about how to build this new political philosophy. Let me follow up on what Katerina said. We should add here the following. Let's talk about martyrs, those who are willing to give up their lives for faith. It was not about them being ready to die. It was not that. And this is what sets apart Christian from non-Christian. Non-Christians talk about transhumanism or overcoming biological death. And Christians continue to realize that death is something that will happen to us. We are not going to live on this earth forever. Coming back to martyrs. To them, it was about the value of faith. And faith was a greater value than their lives were. But it doesn't go to show that our lives shouldn't be safe, because our lives should be safe if possible. It's about, well-being. You've got the 20th century teachings of the Catholic social teachings of the Church. Liberals would say that humans can overcome the impact of primeval sin by establishing good rapports with others. And by doing that, we are improving the conditions to overcome our weaknesses so that we sin less. And politically speaking, as a result, we can create more inclusive communities that work better. And now we're arriving at the issue of safety and security. It's a shame that Father Professor is not here, because I disagree with his lecture and I wanted to have this dispute with him. So, I understand that theologically, it is important to have this holistic idea of safety and security. It's about physical security and environmental security and inequality. Yes, theologically, it is true. But I'm going to follow up on what Madam Senator has said. Safety and security is a reactive value and is dominant in nature. Let me explain. So safety and security is not something that we consider until we feel threatened. This is when we consider safety and security. So sometimes people say, why wasn't Europe ready? Why wasn't Europe ready for this situation? Why? Because for 30 years, since the end of the Balkans War until the war in Ukraine, Europeans did not believe that they should invest in defense because nobody had been feeling threatened. It's as simple as that. So this value is reactive. Now, it is also a value that is dominant. Let me explain. You've got a pool of risks and threats, and usually we focus on the ones that are the most relevant to us, the most important to us. And for Eastern flank Europeans, Poles, Latvians, Estonians, Lithuanians, Finns, well, they are in the northeast, and for Norwegians too, for Romanians, because they've got this whole Transnistria nearby. For them, physical safety, security matters the most. It's not about inequality or environmentalism. No, to them what matters the most is their physical safety, physical security. And this is a very good starting point. We need to come to terms with that, because we might look for an ethical answer. And realism has always been appreciated in the Church, which is why Thomas Aquinas' theories were so appreciated, and Plato as a poet was left behind in church. So the church looks for realism, and we need to start with a realistic answer or response. I'm going to be open with you. What got me a bit upset is this non-critical approach to Fratelli Tutti's notion. So it was about the just war and moving to just peace. Firstly, dialogue between nations. You can have such a dialogue when there is no war. We are mostly Poles here in this room. Just imagine. You've got Governor Frank, a German who ruled this region, a Nazi, and he started murdering Poles in the 40s, right? He was murdering Poles, he was murdering Jews, and imagine somebody living in a safer, better world says, start dialoguing with him. Start a process of reconciliation with him. It's absurd. Russians are occupying Ukraine, at least a part thereof, and they are committing genocide there. Bucha, Irpin, very much are genocidal events. In such conditions, you should not seek reconciliation. Father Sowa mentioned this letter of the Polish bishops to the German bishops. Yes, but this letter was not written during the war, but 20 years later. Remember about that. It was a letter saying we forgive and we ask for forgiveness. This is what the Polish bishops wrote. So why wars are there? Because we have bad guys. There are people who mean evil. Somebody simply want to attack, rape somebody's wives, and burn somebody's villages and cities. In Ukraine, Russians are trying to Russify Ukrainians, and now Ukrainians are defending themselves, and they are participating in a just war. And another assumption, I believe that Francis had bad advisors when he was writing this encyclical, because Ms. Siewierska is a professional political scientist, and I get it wrong, correct me. So most wars, especially those in Europe and in the Middle East, are conventional wars. There are war drones there, technology is employed, yes, but the strategy is a conventional strategy that is regular for a strategical war. So the Catholic teaching, social teachings of the Church is not a dogma. Cardinal Nemeth in the previous panel said that it's something that stems from a rational dialogue. Thank you. Use this word rational dialogue. Rationality is important here, so we can always take a step back. It's difficult to question papal thoughts. Maybe it's easier for us, lay people, than it is for priests, but the concept of just war is very much something that can be defended, and that's the direction to go. Now, what can the Church respond to that? What is the role that the Church can play? So, resilience is something that the Church can help with. Željana mentioned trust, and resilience is largely about trust. When are we resilient in our families? When children trust their parents, when spouses trust each other. If you have many generations, you can say things to your grandma, especially what is important. You can confess to your loved ones. And when you live well with your neighbors, children come back from home, the parents are not there, they can knock on the door of the neighbors, they play with their kids. And we feel safe in our neighborhoods. We feel safe there. And common good is possible. So we can govern ourselves. It's something that we have accomplished here in Poland. Zovko, you had been a mayor of Cieszyn for years, and a marshal. So local authorities is about building local values, about building local communities. It's something that we have accomplished. But resilience is impossible without trust. Now, Victoria, you have touched upon the following. There are certain truths that stem from Christian teaching. You can arrive at them following another path. So Christianity has this added value. Namely, when you have a religious community, you also have a community of trust, and this is the added value of Christianity. We Christians and Catholics, we are clashing with one another. It is true, but even if there is some controversy, there is some trust. We've got a mass, there is the sign of peace, and there is this minimorum of trust. You've got a handshake, or at least you look somebody in the eye and nod your head, right? This is an added value, added to faith that impacts our social lives. What happens when there is trust? When there is trust, it's quite positive. Remember that our political lives are very much divided, not only here in Poland. We are conflicted here in Poland.
Very often this conflict is moved from politics to ethics, anthropology. I think Jerzy Owsiak said in Poland that those voting for the PiS are evil. Those from the PiS say that those representing the platform represent the German option, as it's called in Poland. So we are very deeply in this argument. It's even deeper than just an ordinary political argument. Also, the founding fathers, Victoria spoke about them. They never said that we are going to have a Europe of just one single political party. There will always be divisions, and we have a Europe of different political parties, of course, with different arguments. It has always been like this. There are different positions, different perspectives, and it should remain so, perhaps. But very often we move to not only ethical but existential level, where we stigmatize those whose political opinion is different. What does it result in? It destroys very often this fundamental trust. We are not able very often in fundamental issues where there should be no differences of opinion, safety, security, but it is not there, just like in the case of the reactions to the current war in Ukraine and the position of Europe. I think that the Church can teach us perhaps to have this trust, build this trust, confidence. We also here in Krakow, the tradition of priest Tischner important here, and solidarity movement in Poland. Professor Schwartz also referred to this notion of solidarity. So very briefly, Józef Tischner, priest, philosopher here from Krakow, he said that we have solidarity in three different areas, as if a triangle. Someone who has been hurt, who needs help, someone who responds to this help through conscience. This has to be a response of the conscience, as if. And we also have the third element, the community of sentiment, as he calls it. I would add to this triangle, because this triangle, I think, can be modified, developed. I would add an element of courage to that. You should not fear. You should have courage to help others, to assist them. And here I agree with priest Professor Schwartz that safety is also another element, an element where you need solidarity. You need to show solidarity to victims, Ukrainians, for instance, now. And very clearly, to be able to do that, you need perhaps not only courage, but even more. You need to be free from fear. This is the way I would call it. Tischner did not write about it, but this is something that I think he did take into account. The fact that he wrote his books in difficult communist times certainly shows that he did not have this fear. And also the others around him were also, I think, full of courage. They were able to overcome fear. So this is the way, roughly, I would present the picture as it is now. Thank you very much. Maybe two corrections. First of all, yes, CEC is an organization for Protestant churches, but also Orthodox churches. I apologize for this mistake. Also, another organizations, mainly Orthodox. We would have to explain exactly which of the Orthodox churches belong to which organization, because there are at least two, but maybe not today. I'm sorry for this mixing up. And again, Professor, our idea, as you were right to observe, there are three of us representatives of different perspectives, and we represent different organizations, different views, but it's not about just fighting and conflict. It's important to talk, and I think such conversations can be very interesting with different perspectives. There are people who are able to sit at one table representing different views, but they can sit together and talk. We want to show it also here, that it is possible. Yes, Željana wanted to react.
Yeah, as I said already, I'm a politician, not a philosopher, and that's right. But politician by not by choice, but by life circumstances, as I think that politics can change our lives. And when politics failed, I mean, first when diplomacy fails, then the war starts. But I think that, we have this saying of UNESCO, the war starts in people's minds, and this is where war finishes. That's a slogan of UNESCO. I used to be ambassador at UNESCO, and I was very proud to do this inscription of two bridges as a symbol of reconciliation in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the old bridge of Mostar, and later on Visegrad Bridge in Visegrad as a symbol of reconciliation between the communities, even though at that time they were not reconciled. But the storytelling that this will help brought, the same stake for the communities and the increase of tourism, cultural tourism, proud as well the pride in their heritage, shared heritage, and rebuilded sort of reconciliation that no international community could have rebuilt, or no talks, even Renovabis couldn't rebuild what UNESCO with this added value of having two historical sites and being proud of your shared heritage could have done. And respect as well. Because I've been in a situation, and please don't mix it. I mean, we've been through a terrible war. Massacres in Vukovar and massacres in Srebrenica should not be forgotten. That was not conventional war. It was a savage massacres. And there was nothing conventional in that. Every war is a terrible war, where women and children are being taken. I mean, what is happening now in Israel, first in Gaza. First they killed 1,200 people, and then they took 200 hostages. And of course they increased the hatred between the communities. And if we continued with adding oil on this hatred and demonizing the enemy and not building the road towards reconciliation, then we are not Christians. Honestly, I was brought up by my grandfather, who was blind and who was praying rosary every day. And I was brought up by the stories that, you should always respect other religion. And that 50 years of peace, although, his brother was disappeared in Bleiburg on the way of cross, it was the best period because, God, as you said rightly, you're Christian and you are guaranteed the heaven if you forgive, not if you are adding oil to the fire. The problem in Bosnia and Herzegovina is electoral law and the constitution, not reconciliation between the communities. I mean, after the war, I was interpreter at a conference on reconciliation in London, and they were saying, like, if they knew each other, they wouldn't kill each other. I mean, the neighbors who knew each other the best and they shared religious holidays, they were the worst in killing. So there is no one will get closer to people when they start. I mean, you see the disputes within a family. I mean, I wish we had the problems that in Poland you have between the parties. You don't have a huge migration, you don't have issues, you're only disputing whether which direction, how you will take Christian religion. But what the problems that, for example, some countries have, it's amazing, and this is the real chaos. So I think the safety for Christian is really to recognize, as you say, where is this safety? There's no safety if you want to. I mean, and I really truly grateful that I learned from Orthodox, something that Catholics are always teaching us as well. And the first saints, like, you know, Teresa of Avila, who was a doctor of the church, she wanted to go as a martyr when she was 13 years old, because church was in a great crisis in Spain at the time, because they were with the government. And they didn't take care of the poor so much. So later on, she wanted to reform the church in order to get closer to the people, and she did it with Carmelite. But we have to look deep into ourselves and to understand and to see whether we are true Christians, whether we want to build this world and heaven according to our standards, or we want really to look at the Jesus and to see how much he suffered. And the first one who he took to heaven was the biggest sinner who was next to him on the cross. So our road to be saved is to protect minorities and to take protection and to stand of the rights of the different beliefs, religion, and even those who are not believing. I mean, who are to be tolerant to everything in society, but you cannot be a real Christian if you are afraid to say that you are, and if you don't fight for your right to be a real Christian. Thank you.
Chciałem tylko jeszcze tak, bo to bardzo...
Well, so many different issues raised here during our discussion. Professor, you mentioned the martyrs also. Yes, let me just add that, well, one should not expect anyone to be a martyr. Even the martyrs, well, were not perhaps ready for being martyrs. They just protected or defended their beliefs. Why do I mention that? Well, the reason is that I would like to, perhaps in a somewhat artificial way, but for cognitive reasons it might be interesting to draw the following line. First of all, the first question. What is the difference in the Christian thinking about safe Europe? Safe Europe as something that objectively exists. Europe is safe, or maybe Europe is not safe, in your opinion. What would need to happen so that we think about Europe as a safe continent or unsafe continent? The feeling of safety may be something different, because on the one hand we can have people feeling safe. It's a bit like the levels of threat. We all know that those who are experts in security for cities, for instance, there is a difference. On the one hand, statistical number of crimes, for instance, and something different is the feeling of safety or security. Statistics may go down, but actually the feeling of safety is not growing, but also going down, because people do not have this feeling of safety. So let us try to draw this difference for cognitive reasons. So, okay, we can say, what do you think? Is there anything that Christians would expect from Europe so that Europe is safe? Something that we as Christians have to deal with, because then I will ask the next question: what would need to happen so that this feeling of safety goes up, so that people feel safe? It's not the same thing. So again, let us start with the first thing. Europe is safe, or safer, or maybe less safe. What does that mean? I'm not sure whether I made it clear. Is it artificial or not? Željana, would you like to start?
Honestly, I don't understand what is this as, how do we have to define it?
Okay,
yeah.
I would just explain it that there is the difference of
yeah.
the objective situation. For example, Europe is safe.
Yeah.
I live in a safe country. I live in a safe continent, safe organization. This is different than the feeling of safety, feeling of security. This is subjective. I don't feel safe. It's not always the same than to live in something. The question is of subjective reception, if this is really safe, the place I live or not.
I mean, I could just share a personal opinion on what it means to be safe and to feel safe. Comparing to United States of America at the moment, Europe is very much a safe place, especially if you land in Split. And that's a feeling of safety, a personal feeling of safety when you're coming from the areas where you have a deeply polarized society, where you had this killing of Charlie Kirk, who was debating only his fate. And now the polarized situation where you have violence in a society that we looked upon as a democratic society, and it's not anymore, where you have deeply divided even Brussels when you go out. I mean, if you go out from the parliament, you don't feel safe. Walking streets in Krakow, I feel very much safe because Krakow does not have this huge migration, but that's not something that it's that you brought it yourself. It's the fact that Eastern Europe did not have these issues and did not have, as opposed to Western Europe, did not have these historical changes that will come by the time. But I mean, comparing to the time when I was young, I think safety comes from within you. If you are paranoid, you will feel scared all the time. But if you are confident and if you know that God is with you, you feel safe even in Abidjan, as I used to, travel all around the world. And if you have this self-confidence and if you are good and respect the other, you should feel safe. I mean, we are investing in this preparedness in defense. I mean, in a committee for defense. But no weapon will guarantee the safety of the citizens if we don't invest in education, in communication, in dialogue, and to support the dialogue, and as well the churches and NGOs, the real NGOs that are working with social cohesion on the ground. Because instead of investing in ideological debates, we have to really take care of the fact that some communities should not feel deprived, and then they're pushed to the wall and there's no protections that will make you feel safe. I was chief election observer in Honduras, and they thought that with the changes of the government they will have a better life, better safety and everything, and from the right came change to left, and now it's the state of emergency that is incredible. And these people are walking towards United States of America because they are looking for safety. So everything is quite relative, and I think that what we have failed is honestly this dialogue, communication, and lessons learned, where we failed with United Nations, where we failed with multilateral system, where we failed in with investment, and how we really neglected the true communities that we had to feel them respected. I mean, I know this, we were talking about the churches that are doing projects in Africa, building school, helping the communities to take them out of the poverty. No one wanted to invest in that. And when I asked for it, I was just getting, the ignorance and the silence. So if somebody's, if you feel, I even don't feel threatened by mares, because I was going to these projects in Honduras where the church was rebuilding schools, and I didn't feel threatened because I was coming with a good intention. So that's safety is a personal choice.
No, i tak, i nie.
Well, yes and no, I would say, because before I ask the next question or ask Katerina to react, to make it easier, maybe I overcomplicated it. Do you feel safe in Europe? This is the first question. In a moment I will pose it, and then I will ask, do you feel safe in Poland? Well, depending on where exactly in Poland. Someone will say yes, someone will say I'm looking for a flat in Spain. You all know that this is what happens. Many people in Poland, they say that yes, in general we feel safe here, but we are thinking about where we will go if there is a war. I'm from Czechia. On the Czech border, we all know that we will cross the border if something happens in Poland. So in my question, I wanted to stress the fact that, first of all, the physical situation where we are, as Professor Kościelniak said, the place where I am, Europe, is Europe safe today? Until recently, when we asked people in Portugal, they said yes. But now it seems to be changing. The Danes in Denmark, again, you've heard about the recent drones over the airports in Denmark. They feel less safe, perhaps, in Europe than they did. So, well, and now the subjective question, do you feel safe subjectively? But again, is Europe safe in general? Does it depend in any way, this feeling, on whether we are Christian or not? Perhaps, Katerina, what is your approach?
Yes, thank you so much. I think it's very difficult to speak about safety in general without taking into consideration the context. I think it's a very contextual matter, safety. And also in Europe, we have many different contexts, and safety is understood differently. If you come from some not so privileged countries in Europe and you grow grow up there, as a young person, you know that you're not so safe. Depends always where you live. Let me give you two examples. I live in Belgium at the moment. It is a safe country. I have a good job, good salary. Everything around me is safe. I'm protected in the neighborhood where I stay. Does this necessarily mean that I feel safe? Safety, I think, is something deeper, and it has to do also, one, with the context, but also with the individual, and whether the individual feels appreciated, feels valued and fulfilled in the context where they are. Another example, I talked to Father Ihor Shaban from Ukraine, and I ask, how do you keep up after 3 years of war, and you smile and you continue with your life? When we visited there, we saw that people continue with their life. Like, how do you do it? You are not safe. Like, how do you keep on? And their response is the hope they have in Christ. They feel this other safety, this other kind of deeper safety. And here I want to bring in another Christian concept, which I consider very important for this debate. In John 10:10, Christ says, I came to give you life, give us life, to give them, us, life, and give them life in abundance. I think this concept of life in abundance is the meaning of safety for me. So the goal is not just to be protected from external threats, but the goal is to build a life that enables nations and people to flourish. And this means a kind of holistic understanding of safety. In the key speech that we listened to, this was described eloquently. So it has to do with us as people who have a body, a soul, a heart, a mind, our senses. Everything needs to be included in that. So then it's about healthcare, about education, about a safe natural environment, about the arts, about how we relate generally to everyone around us and the world.
Yeah. Can you put headphones? Tak, bo to jakby zmierzamy w podobnym kierunku. Ja zaraz oddam głos jeszcze.
Yes, we are headed in a similar direction. I'll give the floor to Madam Senator in a moment, but there are two interdependent things. One, an objective situation that we are in, a context that we are in. And there is another thing that is our sense of safety and security. And you can have a different sense in the very same situation, depending on the context, depending on how you were raised. In a conversation, you need to specify what we are discussing. If we don't, we are simply going to skate on the surface and deal only with cliches. Madam Senator, now, a sense of safety and security. When I feel safe, I look through the prism of my own personal safety. Sure, you could say that we live in Poland and we border with Ukraine and the distance doesn't matter today. Because, you know, the energy grid could be attacked at any time because it can be attacked online and planes tend to be late these days. These are the facts. So we have grown accustomed to a sense of safety and security, but it's not as strong as it used to. You know, because some time ago, hackers were not attacking airplanes, and, you know, something can fall off the sky, you know, a drone. So when you look at the facts, you come to conclusion that it's not as safe as it used to be. There is this individual sense of safety and security, but this gives us better comfort. I can have it within me, this sense of safety and security, and people who believe have it easier because, you know, there is always the providence that cares for us, right? That's how we Christians see it. So, I'm in an airport and a plane is running late, right? Can I change that? No. It might arrive in an hour or two. I cannot change that. So I accept the here and now, and I don't fight it. But then I say, but something has changed. It used to be different. And those facts mean that we feel less safe. But this individual approach is very important. A pessimist will never feel safe. And that's the truth. Some people always complain and will look for downsides. Mr. Professor has said it. There are some people that basically have evil oozing out of their hearts. The question is, what are we emanating, right? God gave us free will. At the end of the day, certain things come out of us, of our hearts. So we might have a conversation and I decide whether I'm going to have an argument with them or not. Sure, certain circumstances are more or less conducive to that, but this individual behavior is very important. You know, things are largely about how we respond to given circumstances. The same question, right? It's about how you zoom in or pan out, because we might start discussing the psychology of safety and security, which is a different subject. I believe that we are interested here in politics, or the philosophy of politics, and a certain matrix of ideas is important, because we might look at it the following way. So this matrix of ideas, an example, the vision of the world that we have in us. American, Christian, often Catholic conservatists, Rod Dreher, wrote a very good book. He defends Vladimir Putin. He claims that Vladimir Putin defends certain cultural values. And by doing that, he defends a certain type of world. A few years ago, before the war broke out, I lectured at Università Cattolica in Milan. I was invited by a truly excellent professor, an exquisite expert, and he says, "Come on, why do you have an issue with Putin?" he said. That's what the professor said. Because he's fighting a good fight, culturally, he's very Christian. But then I said, well, there is this such things as the freedom of religion, the freedom of thoughts and civic values, and we Western Christians believe that it is a certain axiological range that can be fit within Catholicism or Christianity in general. And for that reason, the argument that you, Professor, has presented is insufficient. And now I'm coming back to what you said, sir. People who believe that Putin defends true values are not afraid of him. Yes, because they say that Putin is fighting Nazis or fascists in Ukraine. He fights those banderoids. We shouldn't be afraid of Putin. Deep in our hearts, in the heart of hearts, what's the issue? You know, some people believe in this Russian Dostoevskite mysticism, right? We're over that now, hopefully. Anyways, how come Europe is safe? Look at certain regions where you have ethnic conflicts. India, Far East, there had been no reconciliation there, and it is indeed not safe. So the real question is, how come Europe is safe? Let's look at founding fathers once again. You, sir, has asked a very important question. What would have to happen for us to take issue of safety and security seriously? Well, one is World War II. World War II needs to have happened for Western Europeans to take it seriously. So this is what needed to have happened for Europeans to have a geopolitical reset. So the first response was in economic exchange. When you trade, good things happen, right? Medieval missions accompanied tradesmen, merchants. So merchants would venture forth and missionaries would follow or be attached to them. You know, maybe we will tell about God, so we'll convert something, but it was a very natural line of thinking, right? You have this positive added value, economic added value, and then trust is built, resilience is built, and this is when peace happens. This was condition number one. Now, condition number two, and I will not totally agree to what Madam Zovko has said. Europe has not forgiven. First there was reconciliation, and only then there was forgiveness. Because when there is, first you need to have mourning, and you need to process emotions. There is this professor at our university who studies Rwandan reconciliation. What they have there are the houses of mourning, and both parties can jointly mourn their victims, their loved ones, and it's very helpful to them. Those houses of mourning are very helpful in creating social cohesion. You have dialogue there. We do not apologize to begin with. We go through this trauma together. Then the reconciliation takes a long time, and only then can you have some kind of forgiveness. There is an order to it. And for a good reason, in theology, you have the sacrament of confession, and there are certain conditions that need to be met first so that a human can reconcile with God and other humans. Because first you need to fix yourself, you need to be willing to fix yourself, to mend certain things, to make amends. Because if you're not willing to make amends, the meaning of the sacrament is meaningless. So this reconciliation here in Europe is absolutely globally unique. So it is a bit of a philosophical and theological product, export product, a role model that you can follow if you even want to attempt to have a reconciliation, and if you want to attempt to improve the world. But first you need a certain matrix, right? So history, exchange. Coming back to World War II, I discuss it in my students, And in Poland, it's an experience that's passed on from generation to another. And this experience is very much alive with the young people in Poland. You've got the books published by Mr. Zechowicz, you've got TV series, you've got pop culture that targets mostly young people. And that shows you how the experience of World War II is very much alive. This trauma is passed on from one generation to another. In a moment, I'll pass the mic to Madam Senator. So the positive thing here is that you can use it to plan precisely a process of reconciliation. And reconciliation, forgiveness is there so that those things do not happen again. Last thought. Pius XI, in Castel Gandolfo, this Pope painted a picture presenting the Battle of Warsaw, 1920. There was this papal nuncio, and this papal nuncio stayed in Warsaw in 1920. And you know, people believed that Warsaw had been conquered by Soviets. I'm Catholic, I shouldn't say that, but it was not Virgin Mary, but rather the military genius of the Polish commander-in-chief who saved Warsaw and Poland at the time. The thing is, Pius XI painted this picture because this event saved Europe from the Soviet invasion. You know, it was very close to a revolution breaking out in Germany, and this revolution from Germany could spread further on to Western and Southern Europe. So Pius XI knew that the danger was there, the threat was there. This fresco has remained in Castel Gandolfo, and it is a token, you could say, of how much a shock it was, but shock to the elites that were monitoring the situation. Coming back to Founding Fathers, the EU was also successful because this experience truly shook and shocked certain people. It was the kind of experience that rebuilt Europe very comprehensively. Just a few words. The letter written by the Polish bishops to the German bishops, has been mentioned. So, a priest present here, well, we were preparing this conference. We were supposed to organize it in here, and the father mentioned that reconciliation is necessary. It is a prerequisite before you can take any further steps. Imagine that there is an imminent threat. What kind of threat is it? There is some kind of threat, it doesn't matter what. There is an imminent threat. And the challenge to many people, including Christians, is to take care of our safety and security. So when we are facing a threat, what the Christians are going to do? What should they do? So what would be the right Christian stance in the face of a threat? We are talking about a threat and how Christians would or should behave when faced with a threat or a danger.
I mean, Christians are not naive in the face of imminent threat. First of all, they should protect themselves, and they should mobilize. They should do utmost to, keep people in safety. This is what we are doing. That's called deterrence. So this, we are building the strength of peace by preparing ourselves and being ready for the war. So I remember my brother was defending my home, and my mother was saying, as a Christian, she said I couldn't wake him up because he would go to the front line and could kill somebody else's son. But if I didn't wake him up on the time, he will be late and somebody else will kill him. So fortunately, he's alive, but the wounds are, so deep. But the fact is that he stayed and he defended our home. He defended my parents. But what he went through, I would never wish for somebody else, because then the church has the answer to explain why did he, in order to defend his home and his parent, had to shoot somebody else's son. And all his generation is gone generation. Most of them died, and they're sick, and the whole. It's my generation. They're just destroyed. So, but we have to defend our homes, and this is me telling you from personal experiences. If you continue the hate, then you are perpetuating another conflict. But we are building, we are investing, we are rearming Europe, but in the same time we are investing into our diplomacy and trying to find out the way with final actions that Ukraine, in this case, Ukraine is fighting for Europe. And whoever doesn't understand that, doesn't understand the whole issue of this aggression. Ukraine is defending itself only because they chose to go European Union. And that's the worst of all hypocrisies that we have sometimes in our discussions. I mean, what their mothers are going through, to all these boys who are losing their life and their future every day. No one will be able to repay to them. But I think as long as we have a brave Ukrainians, we don't have to feel unsafe. We don't have to feel, and I mean, from the start to part of the Croats, our boys and our men know how to defend ourselves. So we don't question what we have to do. We know what to do. But do we have to be put in this situation that somebody should feel safe in a center? I don't think so. And that's why I'm always advocating strong politicians, strong leaders, strong diplomacy, and efforts in preventive diplomacy. This was my report, as you remember, in the last term. Because we'd never go through lessons learned. And it's easy to, to say, okay, go and fight. But who's going to fight for us? That's the question. Do we have enough soldiers and do we have enough effort to defend ourselves if the situation becomes so dangerous for whole Europe?
Thank you. So we need to respond. If there is a threat, as Christians, we need to respond. Very general question, depending on the threat, but we need to take action. Our compassion involves our responsibility to protect those who are not able to protect themselves. And in Europe, at least, there are policies in place. The professor spoke about a vision and certain norms. We do have these, and we need to make sure they work. And also be creative when there's new challenges that we didn't have in the past, to adjust and to see what needs to be done. If we're talking about the war, for instance, to see the challenge that is in front of us, which we did not expect, and adjust accordingly also our policies. And the priority should be justice and the rule of law in all cases. Thank you.
Well, I just think about two different possible positions close to my heart. First of all, the wise ladies from the Bible. They should not just wait. They need to equip themselves well in advance. And the second, the Samaritan. Your love towards your neighbor, because, well, we will be judged. Take into account our love, as we know. Maybe I will try to respond also. As a theoretician, I wouldn't like to be theoretical in my answer. When the Ukrainians were running away from the bombs over several weeks, We opened our doors to hundreds of thousands, then several million actually Ukrainians in Poland, Ukrainian refugees. Not in some camps, but we opened the doors to our homes, our houses to those refugees. We helped hundreds of thousands of refugees, very often helped them acquire different forms of assistance, find jobs very often. It was a test of solidarity ethics. I think we passed the test at that time, but at the same time, it was something that I think we cannot separate it from Christianity, because, well, I have to stress that both Christians and also non-believers, atheists, also were very much helping Ukrainians, so we should be aware of that. But I think that this is a good example of how to act if suddenly safety is not there anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, we have to finish very soon. I was quite provocative asking those questions. I wrote to also our guests. For instance, just like in a plane, there is this message that in case of problems, put the masks on your face and then on your children's or the others. I think in Christianity it should be very much different. We should go the other way around. We were saying that Christian life was risky, so I think this is exactly what I'm referring to. Just the last point, speaking about Putin, quoting Bartholomew, the Constantinople Patriarch, he said that whatever the Russian priests say, those linked to Putin and Cyril, this is heresy. I think that this is the right word and sums up what we were saying very well. Krysia, comments? No additional comments. Rafał, final. Big thanks to our panelists. Thank you very much for being with us. And now some administrative comments. Thank you very much. My big thanks also go to our moderator and panelists. Thank you. It was a very interesting panel discussion.